I think it worked.
There we go.
Yes. And if I
We're,
turn this on the side, I've got a problem. So shoots, my setup was so ideal, and now I've got to fix it.
hey, as long as we're up and running, that's a win in my book.
Yes, this was like so easy. I did not expect this, so yay.
All
Happy
right. So,
Monday.
well, happy Monday. Happy Women's History Month. Happy release day.
Thank you.
That's why I was going to jump right in and just say congratulations, obviously, on the release of the book.
Thank you.
It's probably a very, very corny question, very kind of trivial, but how did you spend today? What happened when you
Oh,
woke up?
that was a great question. Actually, I have been up since 6:30 this morning. I could not sleep anymore, and I spent my day like chugging coffee and on a social media bender. I was like messaging everyone I know, everyone I've sent books to, seeing if I could get, people to do giveaways. And then just, you get messages from Nick in the morning and he's like, "Congratulations on publishing." And, just that whole like I was getting lots of messages, and I went to Stone and celebrated a fancy lunch, so I might have already had a cocktail. But
It's quite all right. I mean, it's the juxtaposition of two authors. I woke up at 3:30 after my little guy busted his lip on the headboard of the bed, and
mm,
I've been up ever since. So, like, I was telling one of my friends, Alice, I'm like, oh my God, I got to interview her tonight. I hope I'm not like, so how's the book? Oh, that's
coffee. I've already, and naps. Yep,
very
yep.
diligent, though. I mean, I was so terrified the day my book came out that like I really couldn't get in the headspace to do anything other than, all right, just get through the day, just get through the day.
It's so weird. And like you expect to feel, all of these things, and then it's quarantine. So you're celebrating alone, I'm guessing. Did you and your wife and kids like go
So
out and do something?
So it was funny actually when my book came out, my friend Allison was like very adamant. She was like, that Monday we have to hang out. And then my wife, the nursing home she used to work at, I had worked at as a housekeeper. She was like, "Oh, hey, Ziggy wanted to know if you want to make a couple extra bucks. Do you want to come in and be the night cleaner?" I'm like, "Okay." And I told my friend Allison, I'm like, "Hey, I got to clean toilets. I don't think we can hang out." She's like, "No, you don't understand. We have to hang out." I'm like, all right, I'm like, Zig, I can't work Monday. I shouldn't have been working anyway, but that's my rationale was like, books out.
Right.
And
Yep.
I met up with my friend Allison and my wife, and my two kids came with me. And Allison was actually there with my special education teacher, Kate Burnham, who I had a very special bond with. And they came with gifts. Allison got me a framed portrait of my book cover with the date on it. And
Oh,
Kate was there. Kate was more funny. She handed me, I think it was like a 6 pack of Mountain Dew and I was like a huge bag of Sour Patch Kids.
that's a way to celebrate.
So, well, because you mentioned Nick, that was another one of my questions. I'll kind of jump around here, but so how did you find Atmosphere? Because for me, it was like completely arbitrary. It was like I was on Submittable one night, I think September, submitting poems, and I saw this place, Atmosphere Press, and I just went, they're looking for manuscripts. I've been sitting on one for 2 years. I guess I'll just send it in. And then Nick had reached out to me, and I was like, oh my God, what is this?
Yes, I see Heather is on. I don't know, Heather, if you're listening, but Heather is one of my writing friends from San Diego, and she had told me about Submittable, and I was just submitting everything. And I was breaking up the book into essays and trying to submit essays where that was like relevant, and then also just submitting the whole book. And I probably sent that thing on Submittable out to like 15, 20 different places, and Atmosphere was the only one who got back.
Now, before you got on Submittable, had you tried querying agents? Were you sending out manuscripts or like those query emails to people? Or because I know for this book, and this was the fifth of like six manuscripts I'd written that I had sent out. This one was sent out. I lost track. I kept a list. Probably it was 300 plus agents and maybe four responses. One of which was, "You're not doing enough showing. You're telling, but you're not doing enough showing." So, what was your
Oh,
experience like with that?
okay. So I started in 2015 with my first manuscript, and I think I submitted to about
Wow.
100 different people at that point. I had one guy get back to me, read the manuscript, and decline it. And then this second go around, I think I did the same. I had a log of like 100 people, and then, you know, with Submittable, you could kind of tell that what you would be able to get in with was potentially at least just an independent press. Because at
Right.
that point, I was like, I just want it out of my head and out of my hands. And if no one took it from me, I was just gonna sit there and edit it until I think like I needed somebody else to put the stamp of completion on it.
Again, the juxtaposition of two writers, because with me, it was like I finished the manuscript and I sent it to my poetry thesis professor at the time, my friend Allison, and I think that was him, maybe one other person, and was like, oh, Kate. So the two people that saw me the day, and I was just like, I'm good. I'm good with this. And it just sat on my desktop. I finished, mine was done in the summer of 2018. So I started it in the fall of 2017. It was
Wow.
done by 20, because I remember I started writing it in September, right before the It remake came out. And then I finished it right around the time Avengers Infinity War came. Don't ask me why I keep track of these things, but I finished it right when I became a stay-at-home dad was when it was done. And I was just kind of like, I don't even care. I finished the thought. It's done.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you're like, yeah,
I'm so glad to see I wasn't alone in that, because I was like comparing notes of like, oh my God, how many rejections did she even get rejections? Because the book is so good.
there were so many, so many. And like, I just was not going to let people keep rejecting me. I was going to get it out come hell or high water. It was happening. So I love it. I love the perseverance. And when I read your book, that was one of the things too. I was like, I want to know what Atmosphere is putting out and like what I'm up against, because you had said, you'd been submitting. And when I read this, I was like, my God, your manuscript was so good. And your language, you can tell your poets, the way that you just employ the words and like get it all out there. It's beautiful and well written.
Oh,
And I think you show just fine. But I was told the same thing. Also, poets aren't writers or novelists. And the tell show do thing. People say that all the time. But I was blown away. And then I was like, oh my, he's going to read my book and be like,
oh no, I mean, well, one of the things that I loved about talking with you was, and I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot with this, but so you had sent me a message and you were kind of like, and I was like,
oh,
this
yes.
is about the typos, isn't it? This is about the fucking typos, isn't it?
My God.
And I laughed because my wife was like, she was reading it the weekend it came out, and she's pointing them out to me. I'm like, can you just stop doing that? But and she was like, well, because I was thinking like, oh God, if this thing has typos, I'm like, oh, I'm a hack, I'm a sham. But really, in actuality, I was thinking no, because it's kind of like when older artists from like back when everything was recorded on tape and not digitally, if there was like a little tick or something, or there was a little flaw in it, you go, well, you could like really emphasize like, oh, it's a mistake and I'm a hack, or you could look at it as like it was written by a human, it was edited by humans.
Exactly. Amen. We are human and it happens and it's done. It's beautiful and it's out there. And yeah, we're not working with insane presses and millions of people checking and checking. And I was just reading something on Instagram as I was, looking around waiting, and it said, put your art out there. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be the right time. Just
Oh God, no.
let it go. And we all are so hard on ourselves. It's like, if it's not perfect, then we can't give it to the world.
Well, because I wanted to do my due diligence here and stick to some questions that actually segues perfectly, is something that I struggle with about a lot with was the fear of how the book might be received by certain people, because there is a certain biographical element to it, an autobiographical element to it. Did you have any of that? And how did you handle, because for me, it was like this crippling anxiety of both before the book came out and then of course when it came out. And, I did have someone specifically kind of avoiding talking with me about it, which was my mother, because she was
Yeah.
like, oh, people are going to think this woman is me. And I'm not, so there was a part of me that was like almost not ashamed, but like, oh God, what have I done? But the other part of me was like, I had to keep reminding people it's fiction. I'm a writer. It came from my imagination. Did you struggle with that at all?
Oh, so much so. I mean, I hid behind a pseudonym for 4 years. And, I did publish independently once before. And I had a lot of books go out. I had done a giveaway, and I think I had about 250 go out. And I got some really like rough reviews from very like Midwestern married, good,
Oh,
wholesome
from
women.
this book specifically, you would actually.
It was called Cherry Blossom Season back then, but it is the
Wow.
same storyline, only like I've gone way more in depth with dialogue and scenes and just like filling it out. But
Oh,
it was,
wow.
yeah, and there were women who were just like, what is wrong with you? Poor girl, you know, and I was, so it took me a couple years to just realize that art is, it's for some people, not everybody, and it's gonna be great. I mean, if you offend people and people love you, that's better. And I had to get there. Today, my dental school actually published a little like write up about my book coming out, and
Oh, that's
they really,
awesome.
it's exciting and amazing, but at the same time they're highlighting that it was a mental health project, and like I was struggling with all of these things and therefore wrote the book, not because I'm trying to write my success story. This is how you know, everyone in dental is all writing the like grind and make money and influence people, and I'm like, just have a story in a human moment. Like,
Is
and
that kind of, there's a familiarity with me there because I dealt with that on a level of, so when I was in grad school, around the time I finished it, I had a teacher, a professor who was a published writer, and she did a series of books. She was like, Eddie, you really need platforms. You got to go on social media. I'm like, I don't know, man, because at that time I'd been 2 years, I'll jokingly say 2 years sober from social media. I got off of everything. And I'm
yeah,
like, given the climate and the sensitivity to everything going on, like I'm one of those people, I know myself, I'm obnoxious. So if there's something that I feel very passionately about, I'm not going to just like, and I told I warned my wife that I said, if I have an Instagram, I'm not going to just sit there and peddle my book to people I went to high school with or people I start to follow me. I wanted it to be genuinely, sincerely me because who I am, much like you, comes out in my writing.
yeah.
Not to mention that it's like if you did a Google search on me, I'm pretty sure you're going to find a couple of poems, Mind Jump and Americult, and you're going to go, there was a part of me that was like, I lost a few Instagram followers, and like a part of me was like kind of like freaked out, like, oh God, like what have I done? And the other part of me was kind of like, if you've seen my body of work to date with like poems and stuff, you kind of know what I'm about. So I probably shouldn't be too ashamed if you're like, well, I'm not going to read this crap. No, because it's probably not for you. I mean, you mentioned before
Right.
with the housewives and stuff.
Yeah.
So you kind of encountered the same thing, just in a different way.
Yeah. And I mean, family, I definitely had some family members who were not good with it. And like a
Not
couple
super on
years.
board with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my sister didn't talk to me like for a couple years almost. And then it just like, it took people time to just accept that I could write something like this because I come from a strong religious background too.
Well,
And
because you come from rural. I think you would joke to me when we first started talking. Did you say you actually came from Fargo? Or
yes,
okay, so we're talking like Rust Belt, Bible Belt. So a story like this is probably very taboo and controversial.
exactly. And then I get to California and everyone's like, girl,
Well,
nothing.
it's those California liberals, man. It's those California liberals with their surfboards and their long hair.
Yes. Yeah. It's such a different way of life. And
Well,
yeah, yeah.
so you've had this thing since 2015. So what was your process like? And I want to read the question as I wrote it, but I'm looking at some of these questions, and be like, the hell's wrong with you? Like I was trying to be like very Kurt Loder-ish. Like I was even debating, should I wear a sport coat and like talk in like a gravelly voice? Um,
That would have been
as I wrote,
amazing.
take me through your process as a writer. This, for me at least, is and was and will always be the most exciting aspect of creating anything. I mean, I'm a hardcore nerd. Most of the books I read are biographies about groups and bands and behind the scenes of movies I love, like The Crow. And, I'm obsessed with like Kurt Cobain and the grunge scene and all that kind of stuff. Just because it's less about, I just want to live vicariously. Like you created something. Like, what was that like? Where were you mentally, physically? Like, what kept you going? Because the whole act of writing anything, whether it's a poem, short story, novel, it's such an isolating and thankless and fucking tedious process. So when you're writing this book, and obviously you've been working up for so long, like where are you at? Like, what's your process of getting through it?
Okay, this is a beautiful question and I love it. And I wish I would have written things down, but I'm going to start from the beginning, which was my fear of never doing this in the first place, which, I used to write poetry. And when I would write, like in college and when I was in high school, it was a dark place. And I would be very like I would be isolated and depressed, and I would sink into it and really submerge myself. So when I got into dental school and put all of that away, I did it because I was like, there's a dark place I have to go to create. So right away when I decided that I was going to do this, I also accepted that I was going to that dark place. I have a family and a business, and so I would travel a lot. I would get on a plane, I would go to conferences, and then I would be alone in hotels, alone in hotel bars. I would be at Airbnbs, and I would stay up all night and I would write. When I was home and the kids were like occupied, I would go to a bar and I would put on headphones. I had bartenders that I was like paying to keep people away from me. I'm like, I'm over here writing, and I couldn't think about anything else. There was like a possession that I just had to get this story out. So the first go around, it took me 6 months, I think, to write what is basically the skeletal aspects of all 3 books. And during that time, I was just, if I wasn't writing, I was working or with my family, and that was it. Like, I didn't have a functional life.
Well, because you mentioned that it's meant to be a trilogy, do you have the other 2 books written? And if so, are you planning to continue with Atmosphere, or are you thinking you're going to try go through the agents again, all the query letters and stuff like that?
I love being an independent author. The thing that has me so jacked right now, and we always talk about, like, when do you know you're a writer, and how do you finally get that catharsis of letting it go? There is definitely a feeling in me right now where I finally am like, yes, I'm a writer and I've done it. And it's because I'm independent and nobody is controlling me. Nobody told me what ending to write. Nobody gave me that. So I want to keep going in that direction. I
Right.
would not choose a publisher now. I just don't think it would feel right. But as far as like, if I mean, I would like to keep going with Atmosphere because it's nice, and they've been so wonderful to work with. And, you know, we're building a family and a brand, and everyone I work with there has kind of just, they're so positive. They're so different from what you get with the other agencies that seem so,
Right.
yeah.
I feel like the awkward kid brother with Atmosphere. Like, I recently reached out to Bryce, who is my editor, and I reached out to Nick regarding what's going on in Texas with the snow and everything like
Oh,
that. And I'm messaging Nick like, "Are you okay, man? Like, do you need anything? Is everything cool?" And he's probably reading it and be like, "What is this guy asking me?" You know, just because I had a very, especially with Bryce, my editor, he was such a friggin' sweetheart, and it was just like, we would have these 2-3 hour, like, because we had the 2 conversations. You have the initial conversation where you get to know each other, then you're going through and you're emailing, and then you have the follow up. I swear to you, I think the first hour and a half, and he would have to police himself because he'd be like, "All right, man, back to your book." We would talk like politics, horror movies, like just random 90s pop culture stuff. And like, we'd always tie it back. And I always felt so bad. 'Cause I'm like, it's his job to basically stay on point. And like, he'll mention something, or I'll see like, I don't know, like he emailed me something like, "Oh, you know, you had this picture in your house. Like, is that Ben Tramer from Halloween 2?" And he was so funny. Like, that was the best part about working with them was I remember I actually emailed Bryce right before the book came out, because there was a part in my book where he was like, "Okay, so you have this thing with these characters and this big thing happens, and then the characters kind of just don't acknowledge it." And then he just goes, "Given the ages of the characters, sometimes shit just be like that." And I emailed him the night before the book came out. I said, "Bryce, I'm so sorry that it's called Nothing to Get Nostalgic About. I really want to retitle it Shit Be Like That Sometimes."
yes.
Because it was just one of those things. He was just one of those people that I was just like so astounded by, because I'm just like, I can't get over how down to earth he was. And like, what should have felt like a very tedious process and something that should have just made me feel like, so amateurish, and like they were just like, "No, man." Like, I remember even the woman that proofread it had even emailed me, and she's like, "I think you're a little too humble for your own good." Like, 'cause I wanted to be someone that was easy to work with. I mean, did you ever? Because I had that fear the whole time. It's like, are they gonna think I'm like a dick? Like, am I a pain in the ass? Like, I was always afraid of like being too like much for them. Just like, because it's your book and
Oh,
it's your baby and you love it, but at the same time, it's like, I also don't want to piss off the people that are helping me. Did you run into that at all?
not with Atmosphere. I had been through it a couple of times. Um, so my initial go around, I had an editor who I loved. We did have some back and forth like early on where he sat me down. He's like, "Marie, you need to calm down. Like, this is going to get done, and there's not a fire underneath you. Just calm down. He worked with me very, very well, and I loved him. His name was Shane, and I actually dedicated the book to him. He passed away the day I found out Atmosphere was publishing it, which was it was hard. He changed my life. When you sit down and start editing with a person, your manuscript becomes twice the book that it was, because when somebody else gives you insight, they like help you unlock certain things where it might be crystal clear in your mind and it's not to them, and they're like, please help me understand this, and you're like, oh yeah, I can give you exactly what you want. Other people are so good. But I did have another lady that I worked with for almost a year, and it was a paid situation where she was supposed to help me with all this stuff, and I don't know if I was screwed over or what the deal was, but we got into it. So by the time I got to Atmosphere, I had fucked up enough. I was like, okay, I know, like, you tell me.
You know what you're doing. Like you guys get paid to do this for a living. This is your specialty.
Yes, but I was a stickler on the cover. I got a little bit with Nick on the cover because they want, yeah. I wanted what I wanted.
I don't think Nick would be offended. Even when I talked with Nick, one of the things that I became very self-conscious of was he called me when the book was done, and he was talking me through the whole process, like, this is what you do now. And I was so overexcited, I kept talking over him, and I had to keep stopping myself, be like, Nick, I'm so sorry, I'm not being a jerk. I'm just so, and he was so funny. He was just like, oh, no, I think it was the one thing I was like really hammering on was taxes. Cause I'm like, how do you go to an accountant with this? Like, what do? I don't want to get audited. And that's when you're in your 30s and 40s is when you realize, like, I'm asking the publisher, I'm no longer that ambitious teenager or 20-something who's like, I just want to do this. Now I'm actually like, well, I've done it. How do I not get screwed over with my taxes?
Yes. Oh, boy. I haven't done my taxes this year yet.
Yeah, the priorities were kind of all over the place after that. But, yeah, it's so... If you want to, obviously, I'm going to actually try to save this. I'll try to send you a copy of it so you can post it on your Instagram. But talk a little bit about the book. What's it about? Where can we get it? Kind of get into that a little bit. And then I have another question I was going to ask regarding promotion and whatnot.
Okay, so I think I've like learned as I'm writing. Early on, I had a hard time telling people what the book was about because I think I was still figuring it out. But by now, really what I want this to represent is the process of a person going to and through what a memoir writing experience actually is. So this book being what takes a person to that edge when they're literally like, oh my God, I am at the point where I don't know what else to do. And I somebody who, I don't like therapy. I don't believe in, going out and getting help. It's like, I want to fix myself and I'm going to write a memoir to do it. So this one is what gets you to that point. And then the next book is the memoir itself. And then the third book is more what comes after, because, the first write through was just like me blowing everything all over the page and crazy. And I was just writing, I was drinking to write, to feel, to, do all the things I needed to do. And then when I went back and read it, I was like, oh my God, what did I write? And then I went through it with other people and they're like, what were you thinking? And so the third book is really where all of the lessons and the, when you sit down and start rehashing it and looking at yourself critically and, trying to make decisions, from a healthy standpoint, what do you do? And and how do people react to it? That's the whole analysis of the after. So really that's the scope of the project. And of course it's about marriage, it's about professional lives, it's about females, and I get targeted and put in this whole feminist kind of thing, and I've never thought about myself that way, even though I'm a female athlete, I'm a female dentist, I'm a strong independent woman. It's just who I am. And
well, yeah, it's just what you do. There's not like a political gimmick to it. It's just that's what you wake up and you do. That's just who you are.
Yeah, I take it for granted. I thought about that this morning as I was researching things like, the woman who ran the Boston Marathon the first time, it was 1967. That was 50 years ago, and they tried to push her off the course. Like, 50 years ago, I couldn't do what I do. And that's insane what we have. And so if women can look at this book and if anything moves forward from a marriage standpoint, from a professional standpoint, I definitely think me being a female business owner in the profession that I am in, it's still a male dominated world. I mean, we
Oh,
can't,
absolutely.
it is, it's just, yeah.
I
So
mean, that's
pointing out
something
those disparities.
unfortunately, that's something because it's funny that a majority of because, I grew up mostly raised by women, my grandmother, my mother, and my two sisters. I didn't have great experiences with guys, so I always befriended girls. I was always, so a majority of my closest friends are all females. And it's funny that I go back, I had a music teacher once say to me, he goes, Eddie, you got something going for you that a lot of musicians don't, which is girls seem to like you. I'm like, no, they don't. I'm an uggo. He's like, no, no, no. Girls seem to really like you and think you're personable. He goes, if you start to get female followers, that's a big thing because females literally drive the music business. And it was so funny because even with readers, most of the readers I had were mostly female. And I'm just like, that's so bizarre. That's so weird because, obviously there's a female voice in my book, but it's mostly told through a fictional version of me. But it was just so weird to just have, regarding with readers and, what you were addressing was just how many women it resonated with them. And it was like, I mean, there's nothing to it other than the fact that I was raised by women, the book touches on, prejudices in terms of, sexuality and skin color and all that. And it's just, that wasn't me trying to make a definitive political statement or like virtue signal, as I say. That was just how I grew up. It's just what it was. I grew up in a melting pot. I grew up in a suburb in Massachusetts where it was just like everybody knew everybody. And it was predominantly white. But I mean, if you had people in your neighborhood, like I grew up with my friend Allison, who I talked to last night because she's been really freaked out by the uptick in violence against Asian Americans. And it's just like, that doesn't make any sense to me because I'm not colorblind, but like Allison has always been my very best friend. She's adopted. She's Korean, but like I never saw that. I just thought, oh, here's Allison, my very good friend who since 1994, I've so kind of like you with I never thought of myself as a feminist. Like, you don't try to politicize these things because it's just like, this is all I know. This is what I like. In terms with you, it's like, I like exercising. I love running. I love getting on the bicycle. So, and that is so weird that like in the 60s, you wouldn't have been allowed to do that. And it doesn't seem like, 65 million years ago with the dinosaurs, it's like, that's really not that long ago that we weren't allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah. It is the blink of an eye. And so I'm excited for where we are. But I mean, you talk about that female thing and that voice in your book. I think that was the one thing too that really resonated with me when I was looking at your stuff, is that there is a place that people write from, and it is like, you can tell it is their soul bleeding on page with it's unfiltered and it's just raw. And I loved how you did that. And with a woman's voice, if I tried to write in a man's voice, it would be weird.
Well, I got nervous. I got nervous because I know when that book American Dirt came out, it was a white writer who got a lot of flack because she was writing about a culture that she has no understanding of. And I actually, after that controversy, I was talking with my friend Allison about it. I'm like, am I going to get in trouble for talking to the perspective of a gay female? Because I grew up with that. I don't know that firsthand, but so it did make me nervous because, I would think about certain aspects in writing, which I think all the time now in terms of like representation and whose voices and, and it sounds silly, but like, one thing I thought of is, do I have enough characters from diverse cultural backgrounds? And I worried because I'm like, well, if I didn't want to shoehorn them in because specifically I didn't want anyone to think that I was like, all right, I'm just going to make this character black or Asian or female or gay because you need more of that. It was, no, I'm going to write from what I know.
Yes.
Because I don't want to come across as disingenuous. And I don't want to offend anybody who's like, well, what the hell does he know about? Like from my perspective, it was just, these were all people I knew growing up. These were all actual stories and things that actually happened. So was there ever a point with you as a writer, even if you were doing poetry or whatever kind of creative projects, inside or outside of this, where you're just like, am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to? And it's not like it's you're being offensive at all. It's just maybe it's like you don't even know you're being offensive. Like you mentioned the housewives before, being like, I don't know about this. Like, does that ever linger in your subconscious? Like, am I
Oh
allowed to
yeah.
talk about this?
There are even like a couple lines that I wrote that still sometimes, like when I send a book to someone, I'm like, what if they get to this line and then all of a sudden they hate me as a person because I said it? And like living in Southern California, where like almost every woman I encounter here is beautiful. And it's very like, and I, especially when I was back then, I was kind of standoffish and I was very kind of frumpy. And so I had this thing almost against women that were like so put together and so beautiful. And so I have this line about how this saleswoman, I also don't like salespeople. And at dental conferences, it is women in mini dresses and long hair and makeup, and they're all trying to sell, overpriced shit to men mostly. And then they, pick their women's sales pitches. And so I'm like, I describe a way she's walking as in that awkward way a Barbie doll walks or wanders in heels or something like that. And then I'm like, oh no, what if any of my friends now that are gorgeous and dressed that way and look that way read this line and think that
Just start screaming at you like, traitor, traitor,
yes,
you are one of us.
yes, yes, exactly. So there's that. And then of course there's a scene that, that scene that you can read. And oh my God, that was written in the middle of the night with alcohol. And it's always edited with alcohol. And I like stop editing it after a while. I was like, I can't even read it anymore. It's just, it had to
Well,
be there though.
I don't want to monopolize so much of your time because it's such a big day for you. I mean, again, congratulations. This is the birthday of your book. This is your baby. I did want to ask you though, um, one serious and one kind of stupid question. The first being, are you thinking of doing any like remote readings? Are you thinking of doing anything on Instagram Live or Zoom or anything that?
I haven't even thought about it. I have one thing that I would actually love to do. The only thing I've actually considered is seeing if I can get people on board to do a green lights competition type of thing, like what Matthew McConaughey did with his book, where he had made people like read excerpts and then submit it. I
Oh,
was
that's
gonna see
cool.
if right, and they were making fun of like or doing their best Matthew McConaughey impression,
Oh,
rather than
I
me
have
get.
the best. So I wish I even knew about that because my wife would have immediately like my wife when we were dating before she went to bed every night. She's like, "You got to do it. You got to."
Let me see. I need to see this.
All right, all right, all right.
Oh, the eyes and everything.
It's
Oh,
it's it's weird because I also do Forrest Gump, so like we'd get lost with it where I'd be McConaughey and then Gump. So I had to fight the Black Panther Party.
you do that very well. Yes,
It's sad how well I do it. It's a lot of practice.
it's the
Um,
DJ in you. But yeah, I
so
gotta I gotta work on that.
I did want to ask you one more question because this came up a lot with me, and it feels so. I don't want to say superficial because it's all in good fun. But one of the questions I constantly got hammered with by people was, and it's a weird question to answer because it's like, well, I don't think I'm good enough that this would ever be on the table. But these people would ask me, if your book was made into a movie tomorrow, do you have like in your head, like, okay, this person would play this person, or do you have any? Because I didn't have any of that. And one person got actually kind of frustrated with me because she had this amazing actor to play Donald, the shrink in the book. And
Yes.
she goes, well, who's yours? And I go, Pauly Shore. Why would you want? Because I was like, well, I grew up a big fan of Encino Man and in the Army. I like Pauly Shore, even though he's kind of a dick. And I'm like, I just pictured him getting like the whole like losing the Pauly again with all the prosthetics on. He's going to do his first serious role. And Eddie Brophy's going to take Pauly into the legitimate Oscar contention. I mean, did you have anything like that for your book? Like, did you ever wonder, like, I could see so and so playing this person?
Yes, I have a few things sketched out. My one of my goals was to actually like myself write the screenplay. I don't know if I'll ever like now venture into screenplay writing because I like what I'm doing so much. Um, oh my gosh, this is so terrible because I have yeah, the actress's name that I wish would play me, I can't think of her name off the top of my head. I've sort of like stepped away from pop culture right now?
It's always, I've done it over. I mean, for me, it was becoming a parent. I was like such a pop culture nut in my 20s when I was single and very lonely and very pathetic. And then it was like, as you get married and you have kids, it's like Despicable Me and Boss Baby run on a constant loop in my house. So it's like, I credit Instagram and Reddit for me even knowing half the crap I know, because a majority of the time it's just so myopic. It's just like, okay, whatever my kids are into, that's just what I'm also into. So
Yes, that was like a 7 to 10 years while my boys were. Now I'm starting to branch back out again, but it's so honed in on this. Like you said, it's myopic, and I'm not. I can't believe I can't think of her name right now, but I would like it to go. I think it would be really fun, but at the same time, something about the whole keeping it a book and keeping it just this little tiny thing feels very intimate, and I almost would be very happy with that.
there are days when I love that, and then there are days when I'm just like, oh yeah, I have a book out. Oh, like I have those moments where you're just like, you're proud to be independent, and then you're just like, is anyone reading it? Like, kind of like the Spice Girls when they were very popular, and Chris Rock made a joke like, there's like 8 million Spice Girls, or 8 million people that bought the Spice Girls album, and I don't know a single one of them. It's kind of how I felt. Like, I've sold X amount of books, I don't know anyone that has it.
I know. I used to, when I was on Amazon and I could watch, I would actually like log in and check every day to see if like books were selling. And now I can't even.
That's a slippery slope. Maybe I'll end this on that note, because I can say I've done that, and that's a big part of the reason why I don't podcast or blog as much as I did in the past. Because when I used to podcast with a friend of mine, I would literally sit on Podomatic like, where'd our listeners go? We actually had a running joke because we had like a huge base of listeners, and I feel awful. I forget what country it was, and there was a tsunami, like a really just awful tsunami, and I was a big chunk of our listenership went down, and she meant it like seriously, like it wasn't like meant to be offensive. She was like, "Did we lose our listeners to the tsunami?" And I'm like, "Oh, don't even say that. That's horrible." But it kind of became like a recurring thing on our show, like, thanks, that's where, and it was just something that she was like trying to make light of it, because she knew me. I was so obsessed with statistics and numbers and everything else, where I'm just like, we're like, why am I not selling this many an amount of books? Why am I not, because my biggest fear is I'm 33. So in terms of being aged like an NFL player or like a Disney star, I'm already so behind. Like, I've already aged out of the Mickey Mouse Club. Like, there's no hope for me at all. So
no, Patty Griffin became to her first album at 30. Patty, do you know Patty Griffin?
Familiar. I don't know if I've ever listened, but the name does ring a bell.
She went meteoric after that. Like, you've got your whole career ahead of you, and it's going to be amazing. If it's anything like your first book, oh man, keep watching. So, you asked about this. I think, for me, my website and then link in bio is where I'm trying to put how to sell the book, because you can get it through the Barnes and Noble one, you can get it through Amazon, and then also what's that last one?
IndieBound.
IndieBound, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've got all of those links in there. I've got them on my website. I'm sure you have all of those links in your website as well, because there's a reason why we're talking. It's just whatever he was doing with his work was the same heart and soul that I felt with mine. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to pull my like famous like Jay Leno thing now, where the book is Ignite. Came out today. Congratulations. It's so exciting to talk to you. I'm going to try and not screw this up. And when I exit out of this, try to save this video. So hopefully I can get it to you and you can publish it. But thank you so much for talking with me.
Yes, thank you. This was so fun. This was like the highlight of my day. So appreciate it.
Well, have a good rest. Enjoy it.
I will. Thank you. All right.